Welcome to Voices for Care, the podcast where we dive deep into the challenges and triumphs of accessing affordable childcare in Canada. Today, we're excited to be joined by Andrea, a passionate advocate from Nova Scotia. Andrea is not just a mother of two and a parent, she's a powerful voice for a national childcare system that values equity and choice. She believes that every family deserves access to sustainable childcare solutions that truly grow with their communities. Today, Andrea will discuss the urgent need to strip politics from this national $10 a day program, advocating for collaboration at all levels, municipal, provincial, and federal, to dismantle the barriers currently plaguing the system. We'll also hear her insights on why expanding the system to include not just nonprofits, but all forms of childcare is crucial for meeting the diverse needs of Canadian families. Andrea will share her frustrations with recent decisions by the federal government and Minister Sudds that could limit childcare accessibility in her province. Join us as we explore what it takes to make childcare inclusive and available to all, and how parent voices like Andrea's are essential in steering these conversations towards meaningful change. Let's get started. We just held a conference with operators from across the country, quite a few from Nova Scotia, and we've been working with operators in Nova Scotia for the last 18 months to try and understand, because they have a large private sector there too. And yeah, I was really excited that you were willing to talk to me, because I can talk all day to operators, but it's nice, not nice, I guess it's unfortunate to hear a parent saying what we've been saying too. So, I really was grateful that you were willing to do this, and that you are in the news and bringing some awareness to this, because
yeah, it's so funny. I don't know how, but I feel like this crisis, although we saw, people were putting little signs up outside the daycare, like, Houston, we have a problem, like Tim Houston, our premier, like in terms of the childcare crisis. And my daughter was in childcare at the time, and I was walking past these signs and dropping her off every day without a real understanding of what was happening. And I don't know what in our province and in my community specifically, where the disconnect is, but it seems like the public really isn't aware. And maybe that is a result of, they're not publicizing all of the bad things. They're definitely publicizing all of the good things that $10 a day childcare is doing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that they're like, as a whole, there's misunderstanding about what it means to be a private childcare operator versus, nonprofit. Like, what is the difference? In our community, especially, we have really reputable private daycares. That's the majority of our childcare in our community. We're the fastest growing community outside of HRM. So if you drive through, you're like apartment buildings going up everywhere. Like, where are we going to put these people? Where are we going to put these children? Where are we going to, like, in terms of school? So I hear lots of people talking about it, but even having two children in daycare, and it wasn't until the last year or so that I really started to see the impact. So when I give you a little bit of background, my daughter is going to be 5 in September, and my son is 2.5. So when my daughter needed infant care, so I could return to work after 12 months, because for me, it wasn't financially feasible to stay off for 18 months. For some people, that is, and that's great. But I knew that, like, I had heard whisperings, like, it's hard to get childcare. And I really wanted my daughter to be in the center. She's very, very a busy girl, and loves to learn. And so I thought that a more structured environment, like not structured, but kind of school-esque, like they go in, they have their little coat hooks. It kind of feels like school. I thought that was a good fit for her, as opposed to private, which, again, we have tons of like in-home daycares that are amazing. But I wanted my daughter to go to the center. There's one center in all of our community. And again, this is a big growing area. So there's 16 baby infant seats,
Okay.
under 12 months in all of the communities. So I
Wow.
won the lottery by signing her up as soon as, the two lines turned blue on the pregnancy test, and got her lined up. In order to secure that seat, I had to even pay for 3 months where we didn't use the daycare because I wasn't at the 12-month mark, and I wasn't going to put her in daycare that early. I was breastfeeding and what have you. So that was, a challenge. So then she moves up to the toddler location. There's a different center where they go when they turn into toddlers, and then they move upstairs when they become preschoolers there. And so then my son, I reached out to the daycare again, like knowing I was going to need a spot, one of these 16 golden tickets that were available. And I was able to get him in, but it was touch and go for a while there. I was not sure, like right up until the wire, if I was going to get a spot. Then, as he reached toddler age, we noticed that there was no movement, like he was staying in the infant center.
Yeah.
And I was like, he's getting old. He's around quite a few babies. I'd love for him to move up, but there was no movement within the toddler center because there was no room in the preschool center because parents weren't sending their kids to pre-primary.
Yeah.
Because most parents work 12 months of the year. They need childcare in the summer. They need after school care. And that is not something that pre-primary offers here in our province. I'm not sure about your province.
No, we're in the same boat.
So I work full time, 12 months a year. My husband and I also own a business. He's the breadwinner. He works 12 months a year plus like runs the business. So for us, it's not optional for our daughter to even go to pre-primary this year. So they were calling it a gridlock where the babies can't move up because the toddlers aren't moving up because the preschoolers aren't moving up. At one point, the infant center was all toddlers. So then you have this situation where the license requirements for daycares to operate and ratios and whatnot are all depending on ages. So the organizations, I don't even know how they shuffled all that around, but my son finally did move up to the toddler center. And now we were in the panic of what are we going to do with our daughter? We're school, September coming. What are we going to do? And I reached out to the two centers in our community that offer after school programming. And it just was the wait list. Like they're very honest. They're like, you know what? These kids are with us their whole elementary school as after school kids. Like there's not a whole lot of movement. We'll put you on the list. And I'm like, what does this list look like? And that's when I started investigating and calling all of these daycares, like even the ones that weren't, going to be of use to me and my kids. I was just curious. And I came to find, like 200 was the average like list.
Yeah.
And then it's funny, as I've kind of gone public with this, people will argue, well, how many people are on 3 different lists? And I'm like, yes, but how many people are not putting their kids on the list because there's no point? So, I think it all works itself out in the wash. On average, like around 200 kids on every wait list.
Yeah.
I think my education background is social work. So my advocacy is kind of where this all comes from, like just the justice and the social justice aspect of it. Like my sister was a single mom. She, had a teenage pregnancy. And if she hadn't have had access to childcare, what would that have done for her, like her whole trajectory of her life? So I think about all the marginalized people and communities and like, this is not good.
It's crazy. And I think like I've been really trying to point out the difference in what we're hearing from announcements and campaigning around this program versus the on the ground reality of it, because it's 2 totally different pictures. And I think something that was really struck me yesterday, there was a ton of federal announcements this week, one for your province around all the money, now more money coming into this program. And they constantly celebrate this 750,000 childcare spaces they have created under the National $10 a Day program. And I am constantly reminding people that There are currently 2.2 million children that are eligible for this program in Canada, 0 to 5 years old. So you've created space for a third, maybe.
Yeah.
And that's success. Like, we have invested so much federal money and taxpayer money in this program. That is not successful. That tells me that there is no way we're ever going to meet the demand. And we're cutting out the for-profit sector across the country, which is the sector that can move fast, that invests their own capital, that, you know, is innovative and entrepreneurial and can fix this access issue. We're just eliminating them and going nonprofit, which is fine, because I think there should always be a choice and a range in childcare for parents. It's not a one size fits all. But I think that anytime you eliminate private sector, we're doomed to have this access issue. And I don't know how we're gonna ever get out of this.
I think part of, in our province, like what I was finding just in the communication is, I don't know where they adopted this model of this like private daycare, because there's just not a lot of them, you know, like and it's not equally distributed across the province. So for example, in our community, we had one, and it had a small board of directors of hardworking women who are out with their jobs. They have kids, they're active community members, and they're this small board operating a really efficient daycare. Like, the daycare is wonderful. Their philosophy is amazing. They have an amazing director, and the daycare has been running smooth. So there hasn't been a lot of need for the board to like do like kind of interventionist work, or like, you know, everything's been going smooth. And now the childcare crisis in our community is such that all of this pressure is being put on this one childcare center and this 4 board members to address the childcare issue, childcare crisis. And I think that that's something that people don't know. And, you know, luckily the board is amazing, and they're up for the challenge and up to do the work. But my goodness, it's a lot of pressure and it's a lot of hoops. Anytime you're dealing with, you know, government, red tape, programs, applications, all of the things, the steps that you have to take to get anywhere that a private business wouldn't have, it's, and I understand there has to be, you know, it's taxpayer money. They have to be responsible, but also they have to be efficient and smooth operating and be timely with addressing this. So
I had an operator from Nova Scotia who sits on our national coalition share a story with me this week. So she had a center. So she runs daycare centers, but they're for-profit models, so they're not board run. And she's done this successfully there for years. And she had one of her centers that was lost in a wildfire a few years ago. And she's been asking to rebuild it. There's 82 spaces. This is like, she will rebuild this out of her own pocket, private investment, no taxpayer money needs to go into creating this. So she's at the point where she's going to be licensed and she's, you know, ready to be operational. She's received no taxpayer money, total private investment, private capital. And she's having a hard time because there's no private expansion under this $10 a day program. So she can open, like they're always telling us it's choice, you can participate in this program or not, but her parents in her program won't have access to the $10 a day supports, right? And her staff won't have access to the wage enhancements and the benefits that come because it's not allowed in the private sector. So it's just ridiculous for her to even think about operating this. But there was an announcement this week where I think it was 10 or $20 million is going in provincially to create a nonprofit center in her same community that's going to create the same amount of spaces, but they're charging the government and taxpayers over $20,000 per childcare space. And she's ready to open up 82 spaces at zero to taxpayers. So I think that is like where I have a hard time as a private operator and taxpayer understanding this ideology that private business can't be responsible with public funds. We are all following the same regulations. And I find this so ridiculous because it's like you're willing to take taxpayer money to spend, to invest next door to someone who's going to do it for free. And it's only because there's this like federal narrative to create a national public sector. It's just so, and we can see it's not working. We're only 3 years in. I mean, the average wait list across Canada is 2 years.
That is heartbreaking. I didn't hear this story, and it's in my own backyard, I'm sure. So I think that part of this needs to be, we need to be educating the public.
Yeah, absolutely.
About what's happening, because that's where the pressure comes from. And when I first kind of was looking at this, I said to my husband, like, I read the Nova Scotia Childcare, Canada Childcare Agreement. And then I compared it with, our closest neighbor, New Brunswick, and I read theirs, and I was like, this is insane. This is like, what? Not only is New Brunswick allowing a percentage of industry to be private daycares, private operators, they're also acknowledging right in the agreement the vital role that these businesses played during the pandemic in providing childcare for healthcare workers. Totally. So a province over, a couple hours down the road, we're just saying, no, you can't. We basically obliterated a female dominated entrepreneurship industry, gone. So I feel, and there's been talk, I've heard different people say, the agreement was signed without a lot of consideration. There was pressure being put, blah, blah, blah. I've heard people say, it wasn't us, it was the Rankin government, and it was this government, and it was this. And I'm like, I don't care. This is not a thing about politics. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, here we are. Here we are. Here's the crisis. And like Trudeau has said, childcare is an economic, issue, and it is, because people can't work. We also have a labor shortage in our province, and that's something, as a business owner in my community, I wonder, not only for my own children and for these marginalized people that are not going to be able to work, but also for businesses who cannot get workers. How much of that is connected with the fact that women can't get childcare?
It's crazy, right? And there's you hear Christina Freeland yesterday in her announcements was saying that, all this money that's going into now bail this program out in different provinces to create more nonprofit spaces, excluding the private sector and disregarding, again, all of the women that have invested in this space. But she calls it feminist social policy and feminist, economic policy. And me, as a female private operator, I just cringe, because I'm thinking, you've totally expropriated our businesses. You've not recognized the dependence on private childcare across the country. You just have taken it, and you're eliminating us. You're actually reducing parental choice. You're stripping away parents' access to childcare. And when you have no access, you have no choice. Because if you're walking up to a daycare center because that's your first choice for your child, and there's 500 people ahead of you, and you have to now go to each one and just hope to get a spot anywhere, you have zero choice. You're taking what you can get. And I think that is just, when you're creating that system, and then you're turning around and calling it something that is feminist and supporting women, it is blatant hypocrisy to me, and just total disrespect to all of us on the front end here.
I feel like that's the headlines. That's what people are seeing, and they're not. And I don't know if it's because, for example, in my community, when I first kind of got onto this, I said my approach is going to be multi-pronged approach, because this is a major issue, and I feel like I can help. I'm not going to solve everything, but I feel like I can bring attention to this.
Yeah.
And I feel I have a civic responsibility, but also I'm a mom and I need this fixed. Yeah. So I said, I'm going to join the board for this local nonprofit daycare, and I'm going to help them apply for some of these funds and help them, because they obviously need help. This is a lot of work for them, and it's new territory for them. So I said, I'm going to join this board, and they welcomed me on board, and they are wonderful. And then I said, but I also need to be advocating that private daycares need to be permitted to expand. There's a precedent for it. Other provinces are doing it. So I'll be honest, I will not make this political, because to me, I've had good support from our local MP, Cody Boyce. He's met with me. He is very supportive when I brought this issue up. Within like 48 hours, he called me and had a meeting set up.
Amazing.
Our local MLA, John McDonald, again, same thing. I reached out, and within a day, 24 hours, he was sitting down with me talking about it. They are both helping and understanding and working so closely, especially John. He's been incredible with helping me help the nonprofit daycare navigate these waters. So I'm so appreciative on both fronts. But what I will say is, on the private, I was at a meeting and Cody and Jenna were there when they were doing an announcement in the province. And at that meeting, I was told by the Liberal representation that, you know what, the province has to first present it as, they're looking for an amendment, and then we'll work to advocate for it. But it has to be initiated by the province. So I wrote to everybody in the province and saying, look, there's a precedent here. It's in the New Brunswick agreement. And I'm not saying that my letter was what initiated all of this, but what I will say is, shortly after that, Minister Becky Duran wrote a letter asking for an amendment. So the Liberals said they needed the request. The request came in, and then, as you heard recently, Minister Sudds refused. I was like, my mind was blown. It was so frustrating.
It's so frustrating. And then they announced yesterday how much millions to your province. I was just bringing it up, 20 million over 4 years to build spaces, but only in the nonprofit sector. So again, I think that we could really solve this if we just allowed access to people who can create quality childcare for parents, regardless of business model. Because I think most parents, when you're looking for childcare, are you walking into 2 daycare centers, and are you picking one based on the fact that it's a for-profit center run by a director or a nonprofit run by a board? I don't think most parents even understand that there's a difference.
They don't.
And I think that it is really irresponsible of our federal government to roll out a program that eliminates that side of childcare when our country has been dependent on it, without either a plan to offer a fair buyout and respect to these private operators and have those spaces rolled into this national program, or allow free access so that parents can choose, and then we can stop these wait lists of years, because it's absolutely I don't know how parents plan for this. I mean, I was talking to operators in Ontario yesterday, and there's over a 9-year wait list for some parts of Ontario. How does
I have a friend in London, Ontario, and she was saying this is she's a speech pathologist and has 4 young kids, and she was saying this is a major issue here as well.
Major.
So it's I guess through my own kind of education on this, I've learned that this is not a Nova Scotia issue. This is so big. I'm wondering how in provinces like New Brunswick, I haven't had time to investigate this, but are they doing well because they've allowed private to have a percentage?
Well, Alberta has private expansion. So in Alberta, our agreement allows for the creation of 22,500 private childcare spaces over the year. So we can expand to that amount. And we actually are allowed to have private space creation grants, the same as nonprofit. So we can get public money to build centers. There's a lot of requirements. You have to be in a really high demand area and those kind of things. And I think that it's definitely helped here in Alberta. We have wait lists, but they're not at the extreme levels of other provinces like Ontario. But what is happening here I think is worrisome is that we have people coming into because again, there's very little transparency under this agreement. Unless you're digging around and you're really researching, you don't really understand what the fine details are of this. So a lot of people are coming into this program as private businesses in Alberta, signing leases, for 10, 20 years with personal guarantees on commercial space and all these things, not understanding that this private expansion has a limit and it's going to be targeted. So not everyone can just open up in South Calgary and get access to these funded spots. You'll have to get approved and there'll be requirements for that, which we don't know what they are. They don't, again, not transparent. So I think we're going to see like some issues coming forward of people who've gotten in without understanding and now have massive debt and things tied to them. But I feel like one of the things that's really under the surface across the country and really a big thing in Alberta is that these government supports under the $10 a day program are all or nothing. So if your program can't access it, so if you're private and you're not allowed access and you want to expand, you don't get access not only to the $10 a day program, but you don't get access to the subsidy program for low-income families. And you don't get access to the wage supports and provincial like benefit supports for your staff. So, I mean, we're punishing parents and staff under this for working and choosing private childcare. We're not punishing the operators in a way, like we are eliminating families who these supports are supposed to be able, like these are your programs as parents. This is your national childcare program, but you can't access it. You have to pick from one of these government type programs that meet these criteria, whether it's nonprofit or whatever, to be able to access it if you can get a spot. And for the people that are working in these centers, again, like we're in a staffing crisis across the country. That's, the common theme across the country, coast to coast. We just held a national conference last week with operators from coast to coast. And this two common issues were staffing. They cannot get staff. There's just not enough staff with the right criteria and qualifications coming in. And we have no access. Wait lists are everywhere. So even provinces like Manitoba and Saskatchewan, which are almost fully 100% for nonprofit, so there's really little for profit there, all those nonprofits have no access either. So we're not creating enough spaces at a rate that's going to actually support Canadian parents. I mean,
no. And so what you're saying is you in your province, you're even given more opportunity to expand and participate as private industry and still can't meet the demand. Because here in my province, we don't even have the first part of that equation.
And
so
I think
it's scary.
It's very surface though in Alberta, like they have gone to bat for us, but the federal government really will not allow much flexibility on this. I was really hoping when your letter went forward and then your premier was advocating for some, flexibility and an amendment that there would be some change. I think that is really, the writing is very clear in that refusal from Ottawa and disappointing, but maybe more provinces will step up. And I think the only way forward to bring awareness is through parents and through sharing stories about what's happening, because, we got to take the politics out of this. Like the politics need to just go away and let's look at the issue without judgment of who created this program and who signed in and who's responsible. It doesn't matter anymore. We're in this nightmare. Let's fix it. And we need to find a path forward, regardless of political agendas and ideologies here, that's going to work for Canadian families and for children, because that's who's at the heart of this.
And even when I wrote my letter, I sat down, I was sitting down, I was having a conversation with my husband, and I was like, I can already kind of see how this is shaking out, but really, this needs to be all levels of government working together to solve such a big, complex issue. And so my letter, I directed it to our local municipality as well. And they brought it up at their council meeting. They discussed it. They talked about their concerns, and they wrote a letter to our local MLA, which would be the natural, order of operations, I guess you would say. But I guess in my head, I've reached out to the manager of economic and business development and said, what properties does the municipality own that potentially they don't need, that we can go, work together on a solution, like building a center if we can get funding. And, I think that those are the things that we really need to be working towards. You pay municipal tax as well. This is a essential service to your community. This is, and I quoted our municipality's website where they're talking about, a vibrant community, welcome young families. And, I quoted their website on several pieces of this because I'm like, we got to stop saying it's a provincial issue. It's a federal issue. No, it's a, now, like, to me, this is our community. And as a community, what can we do? Because if the federal and provincial governments are not working together on this, we're just going to be in this tailspin forever and ever and ever. And I was really, really, really surprised to see Minister Sudds recent, like you had sent me the link to the meeting where she had a little slip there and saying like what the intentions of the program were.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just very, like, I couldn't even believe that she said, what her conclusion was in the end. I'm just like, oh my goodness, I think like the public needs to hear this.
Yeah.
There would be outrage, but
And
people don't watch
outrage. There should be outrage. I think parents should be outraged because, something too that it gets totally missed in all of this with Minister Sudds' announcements and her HUMA interviews and things is that people that could afford childcare when this rolled out, people that were already paying the amounts before the $10 a day program are the people that are in the $10 a day spaces. Because
Absolutely.
Those are the people
that
are
already there.
They're already there, or they were already on the top of the wait list because they were prepared to pay the fees for that center, and they're in. The people that were marginalized, the people that truly need affordable childcare are now the ones coming into the wait list that'll never see it. They'll never be able to access it.
Okay.
And they're putting them in a situation where they're going to have to choose childcare that maybe isn't regulated, that maybe is not safe, that maybe is not a good fit, that is just out of desperation. Or they're going to be losing jobs, they're not going back to school, and they're at home because there's just no options, right? It's just, such a bad like circle. It just keeps going around. Like it impacts, like you said, the workforce and all the businesses that rely on employees. And
I'm very passionate about, labor market and understanding, I worked a lot in career development. And one of the things that I keep going back to is retirement age, was bumped up. So people are working longer. The cost of everything is so much that people can't afford to retire. So it's not like you can just send your kid home with grandma for the week, like while you work. My parents, work. They're not able to stay home with my kids. So I think that's the reality of a lot of people too, is just like you don't have that family support like maybe traditionally you would have had if your parents were retired. So, and we need our parents to keep working because there's not enough workers. So it's like you said, it's a mess.
It's such a mess. And I can't say thank you enough to you for bringing awareness from a parental view and talking about the community impact, because it's massive impact to communities and to families and to children. Children should not be not aging out of daycare because they can't, parents can't access these supports in other programs. The social emotional impact of that long term on our children. Yeah, all these unintended consequences of this program are just piling up, right? But
I know operators are so tired of saying it. Like they're like, we told them this whole time. And I'm like, honey, I feel you. You must be so tired, because I find it exhausting, from being an outsider. So I think that and I love that you're doing this work, because I think you're taking out the politics. You're just stating the facts. This is what's going on. We need to find a solution. One of the solutions that's readily accessible is to allow private operators to, and what is that? What is the downside of that? I'm not sure. I haven't figured that out yet, but maybe they'd be willing to share.
There's a lot of old stale rhetoric around the fact that private is not the same quality as nonprofit. I wholeheartedly think that is just ridiculousness. On the ground, you are all under the same regulations. Business model does not deter government regulations for health, safety, or quality of childcare. So there's a 50-year-old stale rhetoric that floats through Canada, especially in the Ottawa area, under this program. And, I think that basing this national program on Quebec's model, as Quebec having success in a childcare system, if you look at the Quebec model, it was not successful. They ended up having to invite private childcare and private investment back in because they could not support the demand. It created a two-tiered system. It created some real quality issues and choice issues for families. So I think we all need to start asking questions. I keep saying this to parents and to operators. You've invested in this program. It's coming out of your tax money. It's coming out of your wallet, whether you have children or not. It's a $30 billion federal investment. Actually, that amount's going up daily as they announce more and more and more of these affordability initiatives. Start asking for some responsibility on that money and ask why you have no say in how it's spent and what programs it's creating, right? I think we need to just all start asking some questions around this and checking the numbers when you see a press release. 750,000 spots sounds amazing, but not when there's 2.2 million children waiting for those spaces.
And I can tell you, I did the digging. None of those spaces are happening in my community, where these wait lists are just astronomical. Zero of them were planned.
Because they're killing private investment in the space, right? So
exactly. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Have a great day, Andrea. Thanks. Thank you for joining us on today's journey through the heart of Canada's childcare sector. We hope you found inspiration, insight, and a call to action that resonates with you. But our conversation doesn't end here. The quest for high-quality childcare is ongoing, and your voice is essential in this collective journey. Stay connected and continue to be part of this crucial dialogue by following Voices for Care on your favorite podcast platform. Subscribe to receive updates on new episodes and share with friends and family to broaden our community of advocates. Together, we can make a difference in the lives of children and families across Canada. Don't forget to reach out via our social media channels with your thoughts, stories, and ideas for future episodes. Your input helps shape our mission and the future of childcare in our country. Until next time, keep raising your voice for care, because every child deserves a bright start and every parent is entitled to the choice and care for their family. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of Voices for Care.